The rancher's baby was dying, until an Apache woman knocked on the door. "I have milk." The sun had just begun its slow descent behind the rolling hills when Samuel leaned against the rough wooden fence of his ranch, staring at the empty fields stretching before him. The wind carried the smell of dry grass and dust, and the soft sounds of cattle moving lazily in the distance filled the air. Samuel was a young man, strong and hardworking, but today his shoulders sagged, and his usually steady eyes were clouded with worry. Inside the small, weathered cabin behind him, his wife Mary was cradling their newborn baby, who had been struggling to breathe since the moment he was born. The baby, named Thomas, was the couple's first child. Samuel had imagined a joyful, vibrant household filled with laughter, the sounds of tiny footsteps, and the warmth of a growing family. But reality had been far harsher than he could have ever expected. Thomas was born weaker than most babies, small and pale, with delicate features that seemed almost too fragile for this harsh world. He would wake occasionally with a soft cry, but it was barely more than a whisper. Mary, exhausted and pale herself from days without proper sleep, held him close, gently rocking him back and forth, praying that he would somehow find the strength to survive. The ranch had been their dream. Samuel had inherited a modest piece of land from his father, and over the years he had worked tirelessly to turn it into a thriving homestead. They raised cattle, grew small patches of crops, and kept a few chickens and goats. Life was simple but honest, filled with hard work and quiet satisfaction. Yet, despite their best efforts, nothing had prepared them for the fragility of a tiny human life, and now that fragility pressed on them like a heavy weight they could not shake. Days and nights had blended together into a continuous cycle of worry and care. Every time Thomas stirred, Mary would rush to his side, checking for fever, adjusting his blankets, or trying to feed him from the small bottles of formula they had prepared. Samuel would stay awake for hours, sitting on the edge of the bed or pacing the wooden floor, listening to every little sound, imagining the worst with each tiny breath. The cabin, usually warm with the scent of home-cooked meals and firewood, had become a place of tension and quiet desperation. Neighbors had offered words of sympathy and small gestures of help, but no one had a solution. Samuel and Mary had tried everything they knew. They boiled water, carefully measured formula, and watched every movement Thomas made. They whispered encouraging words to him, hoping their voices could somehow lend him strength. Samuel had even gone into the fields, hoping that a breath of fresh air and the calm rhythm of the cattle might soothe both himself and Mary. But every return to the cabin reminded him that Thomas was still fragile, still fighting for each breath. The couple had begun to feel a creeping sense of helplessness. Samuel, usually confident and resilient, found himself questioning everything he had done to prepare for this moment. Could he provide enough food? Was the cabin warm enough? Were there things he was missing that might help his son survive? These thoughts gnawed at him relentlessly. Mary, though determined, felt a similar weight. She had imagined holding her child, watching him grow and learn, but now she clutched him with fear, praying for any sign of improvement. One particular evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of orange, and the first stars began to twinkle, Samuel sat beside Mary in the dim light of the cabin. The room smelled faintly of dried herbs Mary had burned in an attempt to purify the air, though the scent did little to lift the oppressive mood. Thomas lay between them, his tiny chest rising and falling so faintly that Samuel sometimes feared it might stop altogether. He reached out, gently touching the baby's hand, marveling at how small and delicate it was. "Stay with us, little one," he whispered. "We need you." Mary nodded silently, tears welling in her eyes. She pressed a soft kiss to Thomas's forehead and whispered a prayer, one that carried both hope and fear in equal measure. Sleep had become a rare visitor for the couple. Samuel would stay awake for hours, checking the fire, listening to the wind, and keeping one ear attuned to the faintest sound from Thomas. Mary, despite her exhaustion, could not bring herself to close her eyes for long. Every time she did, she imagined the worst. Each tiny cough or whimper from Thomas sent her heart racing. Friends and relatives had offered advice, but no guidance had been truly helpful. "He's strong," someone would say. "He'll pull through." But words alone could not change the reality they faced. Outside, the ranch continued its quiet life. The cattle grazed lazily, unaware of the tension inside the cabin. The wind whispered through the tall grass, and the evening sun cast long shadows across the fields. Samuel and Mary, though surrounded by the beauty of the plains, felt trapped in a world of uncertainty. The joy they had imagined for their new family seemed distant, almost unreachable. Every day brought a mixture of small victories, like a tiny smile or a faint cry, and setbacks that threatened to undo any hope they had clung to. Despite the exhaustion and worry, Samuel refused to give in to despair. He rose early each morning, fetching water, tending the small garden, and checking on the animals. He cooked simple meals for Mary and himself, careful not to leave the cabin for too long. Each evening, he returned to her side, offering quiet words of reassurance and gentle touches meant to comfort both Mary and Thomas. He knew that his presence mattered, that his calm and determination might somehow help his family endure this crisis. Mary, too, found small ways to keep hope alive. She sang softly to Thomas, telling him stories of the ranch, the animals, and the wide-open plains he would one day explore. She hummed lullabies she had learned as a child, imagining that her voice could protect him. She washed his tiny clothes, kept the cabin tidy, and tried to maintain a sense of normalcy in a world that felt anything but normal. Her love for her son was fierce and unwavering, and it became the anchor that held her steady during the long, sleepless nights. Even as the days passed slowly, there were moments of beauty that reminded Samuel and Mary of life beyond their worry. A fox would sometimes appear near the fence, watching curiously before disappearing into the fields. The sky would explode with color at sunset, and the stars would shine brilliantly at night. The couple would take these moments as reminders that life could still be gentle, even when it seemed most fragile. These glimpses of hope helped them endure, little by little, day by day. Yet despite all their efforts, Thomas's condition remained precarious. He slept much of the time, his tiny body still weak. His cries were soft, almost too quiet to hear. Samuel and Mary could not help but feel the weight of each passing hour, knowing that life and death rested in the balance. They spoke little to each other, sharing looks of concern and hope, holding one another tightly when the fear became too much. And so, in that small cabin on the edge of the plains, a young family clung to hope. Samuel and Mary did everything they could, drawing on love, determination, and faith, waiting for a sign that their tiny son would survive. Every moment was filled with quiet tension, every breath a reminder of the fragility of life. Outside, the world continued its steady rhythm, but inside, the family's world had narrowed to one small, fragile being whose future hung by the thinnest of threads. Little did they know, help was coming from an unexpected direction, a visitor whose presence would change everything and bring hope to a family on the brink of despair. But until that moment arrived, Samuel and Mary held Thomas close, whispered their prayers, and waited, hearts heavy with worry yet refusing to surrender to hopelessness. The ranch, with all its wide-open spaces and golden sunsets, had become a place of waiting, of endurance, and of unwavering love, a place where every moment mattered and every heartbeat was a treasure. The sun had barely risen when a soft knock echoed on the wooden door of the small cabin. Samuel, who had been pacing the floor for hours as Thomas slept fitfully, froze. A knock at this hour was unusual. Neighbors rarely came by early in the morning, and visitors were even rarer in such remote areas. He exchanged a worried glance with Mary, who was sitting on the edge of the bed, cradling the tiny baby. Thomas stirred slightly, his weak cry filling the quiet room. Samuel's stomach twisted with concern as he moved toward the door, wondering who it could be and what they might want. He opened the door slowly, squinting in the bright morning sunlight. Standing there was a woman unlike any Samuel had ever seen. Her skin was a warm, rich brown, and her dark hair fell in long braids over her shoulders. She wore simple clothes, practical for travel, but there was a quiet dignity about her that immediately commanded respect. Her eyes were calm but full of purpose, and in her hand she held a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "I am called Aeon," the woman said softly, her voice steady and gentle. "I have milk. I can help your baby." Samuel blinked, caught off guard by the stranger's sudden appearance and unusual offer. He glanced back at Mary, who looked at him with wide, hopeful eyes. They had tried everything: formula, warmth, careful feeding, but nothing had brought Thomas any real improvement. Could it be possible that a stranger, someone from outside their small world, could make a difference? I don't know," Samuel stammered. "We've tried everything we can. He's so weak." Aeon smiled gently. "I understand, but I have helped children before. Sometimes the smallest thing can make the biggest difference. May I come inside?" Mary, who had been holding her breath, nodded immediately. Samuel stepped aside, allowing the woman to enter. Aeon's presence filled the small cabin, but not with noise or intrusion. It was as if the air itself shifted, lighter and calmer, as though hope had just walked in. She looked at Thomas with a tenderness that made Mary's eyes well up. Samuel could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he watched the interaction between the baby and this mysterious woman. Aeon gently took Thomas from Mary's arms. Her touch was firm but careful, practiced and precise. She whispered soft words to the baby in a language Samuel did not understand, her voice like a melody that seemed to calm even the smallest movements. Thomas, who had been restless and weak, began to settle against her chest. The tiny cries lessened, replaced by a soft, almost imperceptible rhythm of breathing. Samuel and Mary exchanged stunned glances, unable to believe the change they were witnessing. Can you really help him?" Mary asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Aeon nodded. "I will do my best. Sometimes the body just needs what it was meant to have. We will see." She unwrapped the bundle she had been carrying and revealed a small bottle filled with fresh milk. Samuel and Mary had never seen anything like it, but they didn't hesitate. They had no other options, no other hope. They watched silently as Aeon carefully fed Thomas, speaking to him the entire time in soft, soothing tones. As the minutes passed, the change in Thomas became more obvious. His tiny hands, which had remained curled tightly in exhaustion, began to relax. His chest, which had been barely moving with each breath, rose and fell more steadily. Mary's eyes filled with tears as she reached out to touch his small face. He's breathing better," she whispered. Samuel's hand found hers, gripping it tightly, his own eyes wide with disbelief and relief. Aeon did not rush. She moved slowly and deliberately, her actions filled with care and experience. She hummed a gentle melody, a rhythm that seemed to match the baby's heartbeat. Samuel had no idea what language she was speaking, but the sound was calming, almost magical. It was as if she carried something ancient and powerful, a knowledge passed down through generations, something that could reach even the weakest life and lift it toward strength. Hours passed, though it felt like mere moments to Samuel and Mary. They watched Aeon with awe, unable to speak, hardly daring to breathe for fear of disturbing the miracle unfolding before them. When she finally set Thomas back into Mary's arms, his small body seemed lighter, more alive. His eyes fluttered open briefly, focusing on his mother with a weak but unmistakable curiosity. Mary held him close, feeling warmth and life flow back into her child. "Thank you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Samuel placed a hand on Aeon's shoulder, trying to find words. How can we ever repay you?" Aeon shook her head gently. "No repayment is needed, only care, love, and patience. That is what your baby needs most." She smiled softly and stood, glancing around the small cabin as if taking in the place and its struggles. Samuel noticed that she moved with the confidence of someone who had faced hardship herself, someone who understood the fragility of life and the importance of every small act of kindness. Over the next few days, Aeon stayed nearby, visiting Thomas regularly. Each visit brought renewed hope and remarkable improvement. She taught Samuel and Mary small things: how to gently massage the baby's tiny body to aid circulation, how to prepare certain herbs to soothe minor discomfort, and how to keep him comfortable in ways they had never considered. Her guidance was simple but effective, and Samuel marveled at her knowledge. It seemed that every time she came, Thomas grew stronger, more alert, more alive. The couple began to realize that Aeon's arrival had been no coincidence. She had come at exactly the right moment when their hope was thin and their despair was thick. Samuel often caught himself watching her quietly, noticing the kindness in her eyes, the strength in her hands, and the calm certainty in her voice. He realized that she was more than a helper. She was a guide, a lifeline, and perhaps even a guardian sent to protect their child. As the days passed, the family began to develop an unspoken rhythm. Samuel tended the ranch, keeping up with the daily work, while Mary focused on Thomas and the small cabin chores. Aeon visited at regular intervals, her presence a source of stability and reassurance. She never forced herself upon them, never demanded recognition or gratitude. She simply appeared when needed, offering her knowledge, her milk, and her quiet, unshakable support. The small cabin, once filled with anxiety and exhaustion, began to feel different. It was no longer just a place of struggle. It had become a place of healing and hope. The walls, lined with simple wooden furniture and a few personal touches, now echoed with laughter and gentle conversation. Thomas, though still tiny and delicate, was beginning to thrive. Each day brought small milestones: stronger cries, brighter eyes, firmer hands, more alert movements. Every improvement, however minor, felt like a triumph to Samuel and Mary. Samuel often found himself standing by the window, watching Aeon leave after her visits, her figure moving confidently across the fields. He felt gratitude deeper than words could express, coupled with a quiet awe at the way a single person had changed the course of their lives. Mary, too, would often gaze at the horizon after Aeon's visits, feeling a sense of calm and relief that had been absent for so long. They both understood that this woman, a stranger from outside their small world, had brought something extraordinary: hope, knowledge, and a chance at life for their son. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Thomas slept peacefully in Mary's arms. Samuel sat beside her, holding her hand, both of them silently reflecting on the past days. The fear and desperation that had once consumed them were still present, but they had been tempered by something far stronger: belief. Belief that their child could survive, belief that kindness could come from unexpected places, and belief that even in the darkest moments, life could offer miracles. Aeon had not just saved their child. She had reminded them of something essential about the world: that sometimes help comes when you least expect it, from people you may never have met, and that small acts of courage and care can change the course of lives forever. Samuel and Mary understood that their lives had been touched in a way that words could scarcely describe. Their hearts were full, not just with relief for Thomas, but with gratitude and respect for the woman who had given them more than help. She had given them hope. And so the days continued, filled with the rhythm of care, learning, and healing. Samuel and Mary never stopped watching Thomas closely, but each day brought more strength, more color, more life to their tiny son. And each day, they remembered the woman who had appeared on their doorstep with nothing but hope and milk, a stranger who had become their family's quiet hero. In that small cabin on the edge of the plains, a miracle had quietly unfolded, changing their lives forever, and proving that sometimes, salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Days passed since Aeon first arrived at the small ranch, and each day brought new hope. Thomas, once so weak and fragile, was showing signs of life that Samuel and Mary had not dared to dream of. His tiny chest rose and fell more steadily, his eyes opened more often, and a faint color had returned to his cheeks. The couple could hardly believe the transformation, and yet they could see it clearly with their own eyes. Aeon had become a quiet force in their home, a presence that brought calm, wisdom, and care that seemed almost magical. Samuel watched as she moved around the cabin with ease, tending to Thomas as though she had been doing this all her life. She carried a small cloth bundle with herbs, which she prepared with gentle precision. She would hum softly, rocking Thomas in her arms while whispering words in a language neither Samuel nor Mary understood. Yet it wasn't the language itself that mattered. It was the feeling it brought, a sense of calm and safety, as if everything in the world had momentarily slowed to protect the tiny child. Mary found herself learning from Aeon without realizing it. She watched the way Aeon handled Thomas, the gentle pressure of her hands, the patience in her voice, the way she adjusted blankets and swaddled the baby to keep him warm and comfortable. Mary tried to imitate her, and slowly she began to feel more confident. Samuel noticed the change in both of them. The tension that had haunted their home was beginning to lift, replaced with cautious optimism and growing trust. One morning, as the sun rose over the plains, Samuel and Mary were surprised when Aeon suggested they take Thomas outside. The baby had been mostly indoors since his birth, but she explained that fresh air and sunlight, in small doses, could strengthen him. Samuel carefully carried Thomas to the porch, feeling the warmth of the early sun on his back, while Mary followed closely, her heart full of cautious hope. Aeon guided them, explaining how to position the baby so he could feel the sun's gentle warmth without being overwhelmed. Thomas stirred in Samuel's arms, his small eyes blinking in curiosity at the bright world around him. "It is important for him to experience the world slowly," Aeon said softly. "The body grows strong not only with milk, but with light, air, and gentle movement." Her words resonated deeply with both Samuel and Mary. They had been so focused on survival that they had forgotten the simple joys of life, the small miracles that could strengthen Thomas in ways beyond medicine or formula. Over the next few days, Thomas began to respond in ways that startled the couple. He began to smile faintly when he was spoken to, a tiny curve of his lips that seemed to promise life and vitality. He began to reach for objects around him, grasping fingers and toys with a surprising determination. Each small achievement, though modest by ordinary standards, felt monumental to Samuel and Mary. Their home, once filled with fear and uncertainty, was now alive with quiet excitement and cautious joy. Aeon also began to teach them about patience and observation. She explained that babies, especially those who had started life weak, needed to be understood in ways beyond simple care. "Watch his eyes, his hands, his movements," she told Mary one evening. "The body speaks. It tells you what it needs if you listen carefully." Mary listened, fascinated. She began to notice patterns she had never seen before. The way Thomas reacted to different sounds, the way he preferred certain positions, even the subtle movements of his lips when he was hungry or tired. Samuel, too, began paying closer attention, noticing how each action could affect Thomas's mood and well-being. The couple began to incorporate Aeon's guidance into every aspect of their routine. They established a schedule that balanced feeding, rest, gentle exercise, and exposure to sunlight. They spoke to Thomas in soft, encouraging voices, telling him stories about the ranch, the animals, and the rolling plains beyond their home. Samuel taught him about the cattle, showing him the gentle giants that grazed in the fields, while Mary introduced small toys and textures to stimulate his senses. Each day, Thomas grew more alert, more responsive, more alive. Evenings became a special time. Samuel and Mary would sit on the porch, Thomas cradled in their arms, as Aeon shared stories of her life and her people. She spoke of the plains, the rivers, and the forests, of lessons learned from ancestors and the wisdom passed down through generations. Her stories were full of hope, courage, and practical knowledge, but they also carried a sense of wonder, a reminder that life was larger than their small struggles. Thomas, though too young to understand words, seemed to respond to the rhythm of her voice, calming in her presence, eyes following her movements with quiet fascination. One afternoon, Samuel noticed Thomas trying to lift his head while lying on his stomach. It was a small effort, barely noticeable, but to Samuel, it was a milestone of extraordinary importance. He called Mary over and together they encouraged Thomas, supporting his tiny body, praising his effort. Aeon smiled, quietly approving. "He is learning to trust his own strength," she said. "This is as important as the milk he drinks." Samuel realized that she was right. Survival was not just about feeding, it was about teaching Thomas that his body could do more than he had ever known. The bond between the family and Aeon grew stronger with each passing day. Samuel and Mary began to see her not as a visitor, but as a part of their household, a guardian of sorts, whose wisdom and care were invaluable. They respected her deeply, trusting her guidance in ways they had never imagined possible. Aeon, in turn, showed great respect for their home and their efforts, always gentle in her approach, never imposing her ways but guiding them toward better understanding and stronger care. One evening, as a storm approached, Samuel and Mary were worried about Thomas. The baby had never reacted well to sudden changes in weather, and his fragile health made the couple nervous. Aeon noticed their concern and calmly prepared a warm area in the cabin, carefully wrapping Thomas in layers to maintain his body temperature. She hummed softly, a melody that seemed to drown out the rumble of distant thunder, and Thomas, surprisingly, remained calm and secure. Samuel watched in awe, realizing that Aeon's presence was more than practical. It was almost magical in its ability to bring peace and stability. The storm passed, leaving the plains washed in fresh, clean light. Thomas slept peacefully, and for the first time, Samuel and Mary felt that their son had truly been given a second chance at life. They could not stop marveling at the transformation. From a baby barely surviving, Thomas was now alert, responsive, and growing stronger each day. The exhaustion and fear that had once consumed the household were replaced with hope, gratitude, and the quiet joy of witnessing life flourish. Aeon's visits continued, but she began teaching the couple more about independence. "You must learn to trust your own care," she said one morning. "I can help now, but soon you must be the guides. You are his parents. Your presence, your love, your patience, that is what will sustain him." Samuel and Mary listened carefully, understanding the wisdom behind her words. They practiced feeding, bathing, and soothing Thomas under her guidance, gaining confidence and realizing that they were capable of nurturing their child in ways they had never imagined. One particular morning, Thomas laughed for the first time. It was a tiny, fragile sound, but it was unmistakable, a joyful, pure expression of life. Samuel and Mary could hardly contain their emotions. Tears flowed freely as they hugged one another, astonished at the miracle before them. Aeon smiled quietly, her eyes reflecting satisfaction and joy. "He has learned that life can be gentle," she said, "and now he knows he is safe." In the weeks that followed, Thomas's progress continued. He began rolling over, lifting his head more confidently, and responding to voices and gestures with increasing awareness. Samuel and Mary were amazed at the resilience of their son, realizing that Aeon's presence had not just saved him physically, but had nurtured his spirit and his courage to live. Their home, once filled with tension and fear, now echoed with the soft sounds of a growing child exploring the world around him. Through it all, Samuel and Mary learned lessons that went far beyond childcare. They learned patience, observation, and the importance of listening, not just to the body, but to the small, quiet signals that life sends. They learned that hope can come from unexpected places, and that sometimes strangers carry wisdom and kindness that change lives forever. Most importantly, they learned the extraordinary power of love, care, and trust, the foundation upon which Thomas could continue to grow strong and healthy. And so, life in the small cabin continued, filled with warmth, laughter, and learning. Aeon remained a quiet presence, guiding and teaching, but also allowing the couple to grow in confidence and strength. Thomas, once so weak and fragile, was now thriving, a living testament to the power of care, hope, and the extraordinary kindness of a stranger who had knocked on their door when they had needed help the most. The days at the small ranch had begun to take on a rhythm, a quiet harmony that Samuel and Mary had never thought possible when Thomas was born so fragile. The fear and tension that had once filled the cabin had softened, replaced with a growing sense of trust and hope. Aeon's visits continued, but now they were not only about survival, they had become lessons in life, patience, and understanding. Aeon arrived one morning carrying a small bundle of herbs and a few simple tools. Samuel was busy tending to the cattle while Mary prepared a warm area for Thomas. When Aeon entered the cabin, she greeted them both with a gentle smile. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm and soothing. "Today, I want to show you how to help him explore his world safely. Growth is more than strength. It is learning to understand the world around him." Mary nodded eagerly, her eyes bright with anticipation. Samuel, though more reserved, felt a sense of curiosity and gratitude. Over the past weeks, he had watched Thomas grow stronger, smile more often, and even respond to the smallest gestures. Aeon had not only provided milk and care, but had shown them how to nurture his spirit and confidence. Aeon began by guiding Thomas through gentle movements, helping him stretch his tiny arms and legs while he lay on a soft blanket. She encouraged Mary and Samuel to join in, demonstrating slowly and patiently how to support his body without causing discomfort. Thomas responded with tiny kicks and curious eyes, his small hands reaching out as if trying to grasp the world around him. Mary laughed softly, a sound that had been rare in their home during the dark early days of Thomas's life. Samuel watched, smiling too, realizing that this was not just about physical growth, it was about confidence, curiosity, and the joy of discovery. After the exercises, Aeon took Thomas outside. The morning sun bathed the porch in gentle warmth, and a soft breeze carried the scent of grass and earth. "He must learn the rhythm of the land," Aeon said. "The plains, the sun, the wind, they are teachers. Life is more than survival, it is understanding your place in the world." Samuel helped hold Thomas as Aeon guided them, showing how to expose him to the outdoors safely. Thomas blinked in the bright sunlight, his small body alert and curious. Mary watched with awe, realizing that the tiny world Thomas had known for weeks was expanding, thanks to Aeon's wisdom. As the days passed, Aeon's teachings extended beyond the care of Thomas. She began sharing small lessons about life, patience, and resilience. She told stories of her ancestors, of people who had lived in harmony with the land, who had faced hardship with courage and hope. She spoke of rivers and mountains, of survival and kindness, and of the quiet power of observation. Samuel and Mary listened, often in silence, absorbing her words. They began to understand that life was larger than the challenges they faced, and that wisdom often came from those who had lived close to the earth and its rhythms. One afternoon, Aeon taught Thomas a small game. She placed a soft cloth on the floor and encouraged him to reach for small objects placed carefully around him. The baby struggled at first, his movements weak, but with gentle encouragement from Aeon and his parents, he managed to grasp a small wooden toy. His tiny fingers clenched it and his eyes sparkled with delight. Mary clapped softly and Samuel laughed quietly. Aeon smiled, her eyes reflecting pride and quiet satisfaction. "He is learning patience and determination," she said. "These qualities will serve him for a lifetime." Over time, the couple noticed changes in themselves as well. Samuel, who had always been practical and focused on work, began to appreciate the small moments, the sound of Thomas's laughter, the beauty of the plains at sunrise, the quiet wisdom in Aeon's teachings. Mary found herself more confident in her care for Thomas, learning to trust her instincts and observe the subtle signals her child offered. Aeon's guidance was gentle, never forcing them, always allowing them to grow alongside Thomas. One evening, after a long day of care and play, the three adults sat together on the porch. Thomas slept peacefully in Mary's arms, his tiny chest rising and falling steadily. The sky was painted with hues of orange and pink, and the soft breeze carried the scent of the fields. Samuel spoke quietly, almost to himself. "I never thought we could feel like this, like life is not just surviving but truly living." Aeon nodded. "Life is full of lessons," she said. "The smallest beings often teach the greatest wisdom. He will teach you patience, love, and the importance of being present." Mary rested her head against Samuel's shoulder, feeling a sense of peace she had not known in weeks. Aeon also shared practical wisdom about the land. She explained how to observe the weather, how to care for the animals in harmony with nature, and how small adjustments in daily routines could improve life on the ranch. Samuel, a man of hard work and discipline, realized that her knowledge was invaluable. He began to apply her suggestions, noticing small improvements in their daily life. Cattle seemed healthier, chores felt lighter, and the cabin became a place of quiet order and peace. The family began to feel a deep sense of connection, not only to Thomas, but to Aeon and even to the land around them. Samuel and Mary had always loved their ranch, but now they saw it differently. It was not just a home or a place of work. It was a living environment, full of lessons and growth, a teacher in its own right. Aeon helped them recognize this, guiding them to see the harmony in daily life and the importance of observing, learning, and respecting the world around them. Through these lessons, the bond between Thomas and Aeon deepened as well. The baby responded to her presence with a sense of trust and calm. His small hands reached for her when she entered the cabin, and his eyes followed her every movement. She encouraged his curiosity, allowing him to explore gently, teaching him that the world was full of wonder, but also that patience and care were necessary to navigate it safely. Samuel and Mary marveled at the way she nurtured his spirit, realizing that she had not only helped him survive, but had given him the tools to thrive. One afternoon, a neighbor stopped by unexpectedly. They were curious about Thomas's remarkable recovery and about the mysterious woman who had helped him. Samuel and Mary exchanged glances and explained simply, "She helped us when we had no hope. She taught us, guided us, and gave our son a chance to live." The neighbor listened in awe, understanding that what had occurred was extraordinary. Aeon, as always, remained humble, explaining that care, patience, and love were often enough to make a real difference. As the weeks continued, Thomas grew stronger, more playful, and more aware of the world around him. Samuel and Mary were learning to trust their instincts, apply Aeon's guidance, and embrace the joys of parenthood fully. The cabin, once a place of worry and fear, had become a home of learning, growth, and connection. The couple began to see their lives differently, recognizing the extraordinary impact of one person's kindness and wisdom. Aeon also began to teach the couple about the importance of gratitude and humility. She explained that life was full of challenges and that the ability to accept help, learn from others, and pass on kindness was essential. Samuel and Mary reflected on her words, realizing that their journey with Thomas had taught them not only about parenthood but about resilience, empathy, and the interconnectedness of life. One quiet evening, as Thomas slept soundly, Samuel looked out across the plains, thinking of the long road they had traveled. The fear, worry, and uncertainty that had once consumed them seemed distant now. In its place was hope, understanding, and a deep sense of gratitude. Mary sat beside him, holding Thomas's tiny hand, and they shared a quiet smile. They had been through a trial that seemed impossible, and yet, with patience, care, and the guidance of a remarkable woman, they had found joy and strength they never knew existed. Aeon, watching from the corner of the cabin, smiled quietly to herself. She knew her work with this family was not finished, but she also knew that Samuel and Mary had learned valuable lessons that would stay with them for life. They had discovered patience, observation, love, and the quiet power of presence. They had learned to see the world not just as a place of survival, but as a place of learning, growth, and connection. And so, life on the small ranch continued, transformed by the bond between a family and a woman who had walked into their lives at exactly the right time. Thomas thrived, Samuel and Mary grew stronger and wiser, and the lessons Aeon had shared would remain with them forever. The days were filled with laughter, learning, and the quiet joy of watching a child grow, nurtured not only by milk and care, but by patience, wisdom, and the extraordinary kindness of a stranger who had become a part of their lives. In the weeks and months that followed, the ranch became a place of life, hope, and harmony. Thomas explored his world with curiosity, Samuel worked with renewed purpose, and Mary embraced motherhood with confidence and love. Aeon's presence remained a quiet anchor, guiding, teaching, and offering support without ever demanding recognition. She had brought more than life back to a fragile baby. She had brought understanding, connection, and the realization that even in the harshest places, hope and kindness could flourish. Months had passed since Aeon first arrived at the small ranch. Thomas, once so fragile and weak, was now a lively, alert baby, full of curiosity and small bursts of energy that brought joy to Samuel and Mary every single day. The cabin, once filled with tension and quiet fear, now echoed with laughter, coos, and the soft rustling of tiny hands exploring the world. It was hard for Samuel and Mary to imagine the dark days when Thomas had struggled to breathe, when every hour had felt like a battle for survival. Yet, they remembered clearly, because those days had shaped the way they cherished every moment now. Aeon's visits had become less frequent, not because her care was no longer needed, but because Samuel and Mary had grown confident in their ability to care for their son. She observed quietly, offering guidance only when necessary, allowing the couple to take responsibility while knowing she was always near if help was required. Her presence had transformed the family, teaching them not just the practical ways to care for Thomas, but also the importance of patience, observation, and love. One bright morning, Aeon arrived carrying a small basket filled with fresh herbs, a gift from the land she often wandered. She handed it to Mary with a gentle smile. "These will help him stay healthy," she said. "But remember, it is not just the herbs or milk that make him strong. It is your care, your attention, and your love." Mary nodded, tears welling in her eyes. She realized how much she had grown in confidence and skill since Aeon had first appeared at their doorstep. She now understood Thomas's needs in ways she never had before, and she felt empowered as a mother. Samuel, too, had changed. He had always been a hardworking man, devoted to the ranch, but now he had learned the deeper lessons of life, the importance of presence, of observing quietly, and of nurturing those you love with patience and care. He carried Thomas to the fields sometimes, letting him feel the wind, the grass, and the warm sun on his skin. He watched his son's tiny hands reach out to touch everything around him, his eyes wide with wonder. It was a joy Samuel had never imagined experiencing, a reward far greater than the satisfaction of a well-tended ranch. Aeon often spent time teaching Thomas in small, playful ways. She would show him how to reach for objects, explore textures, and follow simple movements with his eyes and hands. Samuel and Mary joined in, learning from her every gesture and instruction. These sessions were never rushed. Aeon emphasized that growth, physical, emotional, and mental, required patience and gentle guidance. Thomas responded eagerly, learning quickly and thriving in the warm environment created by his family and their remarkable friend. One afternoon, a gentle rain began to fall, and the three adults watched as Thomas, now able to crawl short distances, explored the cabin and porch. His little hands felt the cool drops of rain, his eyes sparkling with delight. Aeon explained, "Even the rain teaches him something. The world is full of lessons if we allow children to experience it safely. Strength comes from learning, not just from nourishment." Samuel and Mary marveled at her wisdom, understanding that she had taught them more than they could have imagined, not just how to care for a child, but how to see the world as a place of learning, growth, and connection. Thomas's progress was astonishing. His laughter became frequent, a bright sound that filled the cabin and the surrounding ranch. He began to respond to voices, gestures, and small games with intelligence and curiosity. Every day brought new milestones, sitting up unaided, reaching for toys, recognizing familiar faces, and babbling with sounds that hinted at his growing understanding of language. Samuel and Mary celebrated each success with joy and gratitude, knowing how far their child had come from the fragile newborn they had feared might not survive. Aeon's role in the family had evolved. She was no longer just a caregiver. She had become a mentor, a guide, and a beloved friend. She had taught the couple lessons about life that extended far beyond raising a child. She taught them about observing the land, understanding the cycles of nature, and respecting the wisdom inherent in every small creature and plant. Samuel began to appreciate the ranch in new ways, seeing it as a living, teaching space rather than simply a place of work. Mary found joy in simple moments, from preparing meals to bathing Thomas, knowing that every act of care was part of the greater rhythm of life. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Samuel and Mary sat on the porch, Thomas asleep between them. They spoke quietly, reflecting on the extraordinary changes in their lives. "I cannot believe how far we've come," Mary said softly. "We were so desperate, and now," she trailed off, her voice filled with emotion. Samuel squeezed her hand, his eyes following Thomas's gentle breathing. "Yes," he replied. "We were lost, and then someone came into our lives when we needed her most. Aeon, she gave us more than help. She gave us guidance, hope, and the courage to care for him ourselves." Aeon, standing nearby, smiled quietly, her eyes reflecting pride and satisfaction. "You have learned what matters most," she said. "Love, patience, observation. These are gifts you give your child every day. He is strong because you are strong." "I only showed the way." Her humility touched Samuel and Mary deeply. They realized that her presence had been transformative, not only for Thomas, but for them as individuals and as a family. Over time, the bond between Aeon and the family became permanent. She taught them to prepare small remedies from herbs, to notice subtle signs of illness or discomfort, and to care for Thomas's emotional well-being with the same diligence as his physical health. Samuel began to involve Thomas in small tasks around the ranch, showing him how to handle animals gently, how to observe the world carefully, and how to respect all living things. Mary focused on nurturing Thomas's curiosity and creativity, reading stories, teaching songs, and allowing him to explore the small wonders of their home. neighbors began to notice the remarkable changes in the family. Thomas, once a fragile infant, now thrived, his personality emerging fully. Samuel and Mary appeared confident and happy, their bond strengthened by the trials they had overcome. Occasionally, neighbors would ask about the mysterious woman who had helped them, and they would smile and explain simply, "She came to help us when we had no hope. She taught us how to care, how to see the world, and how to raise our son with love and patience." Aeon, always modest, never sought recognition. She had given her help freely, her reward being the flourishing of life she had guided. As Thomas grew, he began to explore further, crawling across the porch and learning to stand with the support of Samuel and Mary. His laughter filled the cabin, the fields, and even the small neighboring ranches. Every sound of joy reminded Samuel and Mary of the miracle that had occurred, the tiny life that had been in danger and had now become the center of love, attention, and hope. The lessons they had learned from Aeon had not only saved Thomas's life, but they had also transformed the family into something stronger, wiser, and more deeply connected. One late afternoon, Aeon prepared to leave for a while, her work elsewhere calling her back to the land she often traveled. Thomas, now able to walk a few steps with support, reached for her hand, his tiny fingers curling around hers. Samuel and Mary exchanged a look, feeling a mixture of gratitude and sadness at her departure. Aeon knelt, smiling at the child she had nurtured. "Remember what I have taught you," she said softly. "Your parents love you, guide you, and protect you. I only showed the path. Your strength comes from the love you share." Samuel and Mary thanked her, tears in their eyes. They realized that her impact on their lives was permanent. Thomas had survived, thrived, and grown into a happy, curious child, thanks to her guidance and care. But beyond that, they had learned to trust themselves, to observe carefully, to nurture with patience, and to appreciate the beauty and fragility of life. Aeon had given them more than life-saving milk. She had given them wisdom that would remain forever. Months later, the family looked back on those early days with gratitude. They shared the story with neighbors and friends, always careful to respect Aeon's humility. "She came to us when we had no hope," Mary would say. "She taught us how to care, how to love, and how to see the world differently." Samuel added, "She showed us that kindness can come from unexpected places, and that sometimes a single person can change the course of a life forever." Thomas continued to grow, strong, curious, and full of joy. His laughter echoed across the ranch, his tiny footsteps following the rhythm of a life that had once been in danger. Samuel and Mary watched him with pride and love, knowing that every smile, every movement, every small achievement was a testament not only to his resilience, but to the extraordinary kindness of a stranger who had appeared at the right moment in their lives. Years later, when Thomas could run across the fields, climb small hills, and laugh freely in the wind, Samuel and Mary would often tell the story of Aeon, the woman who had knocked on their door with nothing but hope and milk, who had transformed a fragile life into one filled with strength, joy, and possibility. They never forgot her lessons, never forgot the gentle guidance she had given, and never forgot the reminder that sometimes help and wisdom come from the most unexpected places. The ranch, the cabin, and the plains around them became more than a home. They became a testament to survival, growth, and the power of human kindness. Samuel and Mary knew that Thomas's life, once so uncertain, had been changed forever by one extraordinary woman, and in their hearts they carried a deep sense of gratitude and respect for her every day. They understood that life was precious, fragile, and filled with lessons, and that the bonds we form, the kindness we show, and the care we give could truly transform the world around us. And so, the story of the small ranch, the fragile baby, and the extraordinary woman who brought hope and life became a tale passed down through the family, a reminder that love, patience, and kindness can create miracles, that courage can be found in unexpected forms, and that, even in the darkest times, hope can arrive when it is needed most.